Welcome, everyone. Dr. Thor here. Get ready for Christ consciousness. Well, I want to talk about artificial intelligence, altered state, matrix realities, etc., when it actually involves you as a physical human being. Now, we can spend hours contemplating theoretical understandings of life. And, I started out this way when I originally got into Indian type religions as a very young child, 10, 11 years old, when I started doing yoga, etc. So I'm well versed within. One of the things that turns me off even to this day is the Indian reality, or any time we get into the fact that we are nothing, we are a pimple in the universe and all those realities. Well, in a very expanded view, that may be true, but that's really not what individual life is all about. Individual life is all about going through the pain and suffering of what life is about. And ultimately, that's what life is about. That's why Buddhism can be summed up as the end of suffering, and has done an interesting job of doing that in its own particular way. And as usual, all religions are faulty and entrap you back into the cycle of reincarnation, which you're trying to escape. But there is a lot of talk of the fact that if you're going to use all this technology and have the exact same experience that you have doing it physically. There's also talk that the brain doesn't know the difference. If you visualize something and see it there in a materialized form at a high enough level that the mind accepts that. They go so far as all these different things that claim to that you can do mentally that your body doesn't know the difference. Well, this couldn't be further from the truth. So this is one of the things we have to be very careful with, of the power of the mind alone. Now, the mind is fascinating, which is basically not the mind, it's the consciousness. You got to remember there's the physical brain, which controls your heart, everything else, and is a physical organ. And then there is your mind, which generally is a toxic sewer because it hasn't been handled properly. It's like having a spoiled brat that you never disciplined or taught anything to in life. It's kind of like that little child, the mind, and everybody's little child is kind of messed up because we didn't take care of it. The mind was never meant to do any complicated work, but we've assigned it to do everything. This is the problem. So basically, we hired somebody who is totally incompetent to do a job, and then we wonder why it can't do the job. Now, your bioenergies, your bioconsciousness, and it's important to have bioconsciousness because all of this is kind of linked together. As much as the advanced thinkers and those wanting to reach higher levels want to become non-physical, it is not really the case until you can actually do that. Disconnecting from society on a physical level is dangerous and will cause all sorts of mental illness, destructive behavior, etc. So we are connected to this reality. And when you want to ascend, you slowly disconnect, but in a slow-mannered fashion. So that's why you want to disconnect from things that keep you to the earth. Things that keep you to the earth? Food, particularly eating dead animals or anything that's dead, anything you kill. Well, that keeps you in the cycle of the earth because that's how the earth works. So you have to understand that if you want to be separated from the earth and get out of the reincarnation cycle, that you have to disconnect from the negative practices that make you a human being. This is also goes into the complete, what else makes you human? Well, the other thing that really drives your entire life, whether we want to admit it or not, and for years I disregarded it, but sexuality is a huge part of everybody's life. It's a psychotic compulsion that you will do anything to fulfill it. It's a chemical, psychological, spiritual problem. So we do need to understand that as part of the process of it. But just disconnecting 100% from all of these things will cause all sorts of problems. We see this with people who are celibate, who cannot. And celibacy is not the answer generally. It's controlled use of sexual energies that you need to learn how to do. Being celibate is a very unnatural state, and it really doesn't help you. People who are celibate don't live longer. They don't do anything better. So the whole idea is that's another fallacy. So it's the whole idea of channeling that energy, recognizing that's part of you. I mean, you've got all these chemicals in you, particularly as a male, testosterone, that drives you insane. It makes you violent. It makes you sexual. I mean, this is just the way it is. What are we supposed to do with that? Well, that's part of the challenge of life and understanding what to do with those energies and how it's important. And hopefully someday my book on that will come out of what you need to do that. And of course, all of this is difficult to do. Well, if it was easy, then what would be the point of being here? That's the problem with, well, you get the ultimate manifestation machine. Well, what does that mean? So you manifest everything you want on every level. Well, hello, God. So what's the point of being in this sewer of reality? So once you reach that stage, there's no. And the fact that you conquer human existence, well, what are you doing here? So it doesn't make any sense. And that's another thing people don't quite understand. That's why these things are so difficult to obtain. It's difficult because everybody, you can make a manifesting device that works quite well, but when it's given to another person in their life, the level they manifest on is very dependent upon their consciousness, their opportunities that are either made or can be made. It's very complicated. That's why success is not one general thing. And a lot of people are successful in places that they kind of stumble into. They never started that way. That's not what their goal was. And this is pretty much everybody in life. You end up somewhere because of opportunities and openings, not necessarily because you projected to go there. Even if you're, let's say, a professional who goes to medical school or law school, well, what kind of medicine are you going to get into? What kind of law? And what is that law going to or medicine bring you? So, I mean, there's many, many phases of that. And a lot of it isn't what people think directly as those professions are. That's the nature of life, and that's where dealing with energies is so important. What are your general energies? Where are you directed? Now, if you have strong success energies around you, you will get all sorts of opportunities. That's what life is about. It isn't saying, I want to do this and I'm going to manifest it. Well, you certainly can try that, and that's how the human mind really loves to do things, but it's really not something that is the best way to think. You want the best opportunity to direct you in the long run to the best result, and that may not be straight line. As a matter of fact, usually it isn't. That's why things are so changeable in life that you have to look at the fact of where are you being directed to, and this usually is a very positive reality. So with that, we have to be fully aware of what's happening to do this properly. Now, let's get to this AI stuff, artificial intelligence and all those. There's really no such thing as AI. There's no such thing as artificial intelligence. These are programmed, and they're not even really intelligence. It's programmed. You're just using a program. It's a tool. So you have to put something in there. And there's such things as fuzzy logic. This came out, 30, 40 years ago, where you kind of let the program decide something. Well, that's not really true when you get into it. Programs are very disciplined. It's hard to have fuzzy logic or have a program decide what's going to happen unless you're using some sort of random number type generator thing. And that's really not random either because it's doing a particular. So random number generators repeat the same program all the time. It is not random. So this is one of the problems when you get into the intricacies of this terminology. But let's also talk about the fact of that what happens in your mind you think is real and affects you just as you would do it physically. Well, this couldn't be further from the truth. And of course, we think this because of our dream states seem so real. But they are very fake in their own way. Generally, if something terrible happens in your dreams, you come out of it, you wake up, it disturbs you. Rarely have I ever heard of anybody dying in their dreams. You may actually see yourself getting badly hurt, but the minute it comes to that, you stop. So this is the whole idea of that, getting back to the Matrix scenario that was shown in the movie The Matrix, so people being plugged in, and that whatever happens to you in the Matrix happens to you in real life, meaning if you die in the Matrix, you die in the real world. Well, this just isn't true because the images created by your ultimate consciousness are not physically real. This is where we have to get into some very deep and extended thinking. Now, how can we come to this conclusion in a scientific manner? Now, life has no value unless you can somehow prove it. It's one of my problems I have with hallucinogens, ayahuasca, and all the other nonsense that is out there is that these are brain created. You are creating it. Now, people think the chemical is the plants talking to you. Well, there could be some of that, but, I'm not sure that I need to talk to a plant. I'm not sure what they can give me. Plants don't understand human reality. Is there something they can give me? Can I learn from the plant world? Well, if I physically consume a plant, I can learn from it in terms of it gives me nutrition. It creates a certain, that's what herbs are, which I use all the time. You're communicating with this plant energy. Not necessarily consciousness, which is a little bit different, but energy, consciousness, all these things kind of whirl together in a kind of a bizarre but potent stew. And how do you figure all that out? So we have to understand the fact that when we're getting into these states of consciousness that are not physically based, complete mental, that this is another realm altogether. And people don't talk about this because they don't get it. So we have to understand that that's part of what's going on in it. So what you experience in the dream state is not real. You're not hurt. You're not killed. And many people go through all sorts of strange things. It may have a effect on your thinking, which then affects your physical life. But this is a secondary. It's not like that. So this can be illustrated in a very advanced situation, which I've heard for many, many years. And that is that you visualize or go through something in your mind, and it's just like doing it. Now, we can relate this to exercise. Now, so they like to tell you that theoretically, or not theoretically, they're stating that if you do it in your mind, your body doesn't know the difference. So if you're in a meditative state and you do sit-ups, that you're going to develop a six-pack. They tell you this, and they say there's no difference between the mental world and the physical world. Well, there's a huge difference. It's just plain and simple that that's a lie. It just isn't true. You can do as many mental sit-ups as you want. You're never, ever going to get a six-pack. It just doesn't work that way. I get a lot of people who want to actually see if they can obtain physical changes through mental states or using different machines, etc. And that is physical changes, not the energy that is involved with it. And this just doesn't work. Some people claim they get these, but I'd like to really see that proven. But certainly if you concentrate on something enough and you're putting enough thought forms out there, you're going to have a minor change. And anytime you think about it and think about it for long periods of time, well, this is going to affect your muscle structure to a certain degree. Now, when you build muscles, which is pretty much unnatural, and particularly most of the muscles that we find attractive, are really unnatural. I mean, you're not going to find, if you look at native cultures and people even do a lot of exercise, one of the things I've always noticed is martial artists always tend to be built badly. Because there's not much in martial arts that builds particularly your core, stomach, and back. So if you watch martial artists, they're doing everything which is basically arm and shoulder based, chest based, legs, etc. So you're not using your stomach very much. And you can't use these muscles unless you do unnatural activities generally. So, and of course, that's a good idea. You want to build these core muscles. Everybody thinks your stomach and back are your core muscles, and it's a good idea. Certainly, it looks much more attractive than a beer belly. So the whole idea is that but if you sit there and meditate every day on your stomach turning into a six-pack, it will never, ever happen. What does that tell us? There's a big difference between the psychic, the brain envisioned, and the physical. There's also a whole bunch of physical things that happen as well. Now, all of this does help. If you do sit-ups and then you visualize the perfect six-pack, it is going to help mold those energies into what you desire. It will give you results faster, but it will not create it without doing it physically. So this is something I've experimented with for years. And as I said, there's even some people online who are charging people to change them physically. And of course, it takes months and years. And by the time you go through this and they get your money, it just is pretty much baseless. But, I'm open to anything. If somebody can show me this. But certainly it isn't something that is very possible or easily done. And I've seen some of these photos, and the changes are really not happening. And this is one of the problems as well. Physical changes through mental activities in a radical way does not happen. Now, let's talk about things that are more energetic. We're talking about things like healing. Now, healing is energetic. Now, when you're talking, muscle is not energetic in its direct way. So if you're talking about healing yourselves, removing energetic problems like opening your third eye, getting your chakras going, removing negativity, uncrossing yourself, these are energetic in nature. And a part of what works here is the direction of psions, psychic energy, to what you need, amplified through a particular type of tool. That's the key to manifestation, which I've said 100 times. There's no research that has to be done. This has been proven for thousands of years, but nobody really comes out and says that. One of the problems is people think that the mind can do everything. First of all, it's not your mind working, it's your consciousness. And people get stuck in the mind and wonder why they don't get great results. Your mind doesn't produce anything of value. It's there to do physical tasks. What produces things is your bioconsciousness. And your bioconsciousness, because it's atrophied, messed up, crossed up, etc., needs to be cleansed, uncrossed, and you need to amplify it, because if you could just produce things so easily by just thinking about it, holding a pixie in your mind, well, the whole world would be changing instantly. We would look out the window and we would see everything just like in a bad movie. One day it's there. You look at it for 1 second, there's trees there. Then you look at it, it's gone because somebody cut them down, blah, blah, blah. So this is the type of silliness that goes on if people could instantly manifest. And again, these are physical things. And we have to be very careful that we note the difference between what is working energetically and what is working physically. But the bottom line is you can visualize all you want to get a six-pack. It will never, ever happen. Now, I guess we could go in and measure the amount. You're going to find you have more energy there, meaning in the fact that it'll be more energetically empowered because you've done visualization on it. You may even start for a minute amount of actual physical changes. But we're talking about radical changes. Nobody wants, it was okay results. No, everybody wants extreme results, which we're always trying to manifest for myself and everyone else. But life is really about this energetic buildup. So if you were to take 5 minutes a day and visualize on the perfect six-pack, and then you would do exercises, you'd find that you probably cut down your exercise by at least a third or even possibly in half, and you'd see much better results because you'd visualize sending the energy to that area to make it look like what you desire. Now, this is very provable. And again, here, it doesn't even cost that much, but nobody's going to do these type of studies. And of course, it's a long story. If you listen to my other lectures, you'll understand what, the problems with this goofball society. There are tools. So people say, you do this or use these electric things that supposedly do the same thing as physical. It puts a little electric shock. It causes your muscles to convulsing, which is similar but not the same to actually doing the exercise. So it's not the same, and there are many areas which are not. Now, when you do something, a whole series of things are happening, including in your brain. You're getting a very strong visualization because it's backed up by physical action. So when you're doing a sit-up, you are visualizing your stomach getting flat, or you should be, or forming into a six-pack. So already you're starting this whole mental process, but there's a lot more to that. Everyone knows when you start exercising, all sorts of chemicals are released. You're building up all sorts of acids, and there's a chemical factor. If you're building muscle, you have to rush sugar to it. All sorts of things have to happen biologically. And I think a certain amount of the reason why some people excel is the fact that their system is doing what it's supposed to do at a higher level. A lot of people take supplements. And of course, a lot of it is just constant repetition to the muscle to tell it what to do through physical and mental action, meaning you're doing the physical action and your mind is saying, get in shape. But just getting in shape mentally will do nothing. Secondly, it's not amplified in any way possible. So if you were to visualize six packs and you amplified it, well, you'd get better results, but I don't think you would get the physical results that people want. Amplification is not strong enough in these kind of areas because you're building something physical. So when you actually amplify, when you're doing something of a semi-non-physical, that's also why when you visualize, you see it as completed, because your mind can't understand in between. Well, you want a house and what, you're going to see it half built? Well, it doesn't make sense, so you say, I have the house instead of I'm going to get the house. These are how things happen in terms of programming people to do this, to manifest. So what you're doing is you're setting up everything in motion to create whatever that is you want. Now, that becomes a multi-layered thing. If you need money to get a house, or you're going to have to get a better job, you're going to have to find opportunities, you're going to have to find the right house. Well, these are the energies that are going out there. It's very complicated. It's just not like I'm going to visualize this and it pops up. It just doesn't work that way. So the whole idea is certainly you can test this with the physical. So doing psychic sit-ups does virtually nothing. So you have to do the physical. You can't replace the physical. So there's no such thing as VR, or artificial intelligence. It doesn't work to that level. And really what's happened recently, and they're covering it up to a degree, but it's also been out there, is the fact that there's been a total failure trying to replace the human brain and understanding how it works in its complicated method. What we're doing with computers is getting down to very physical things that the mind does. Word processing, we've done this for years now with calculators. So the whole idea is, numbers, etc. But when you get into anything else, we get into a very dangerous path, which are programmed there by evil scum people. And if we turn over technology to letting it do what it wants, creating its own language like some people are doing, we then are giving up all of our power over to something that is highly perfect, which has no belief systems, honor, thinking, etc. These work through a program. And I don't care how complicated you make it, you're still doing it to come up with an answer that intelligence, so-called artificial intelligence, can't figure out. It takes human understanding. And the other thing is we keep ruling out, because of the fact that science wants to make us into idiot robots, piles of meat, that there's a whole energetic factor going on. Now, the whole energetic factor going on is not only physical, but it's spiritual. You're bringing in positive energies so you make the right decision. Well, the computer can't do that. It's not set up to do that in any way, and I'm not sure it ever can be. The biological entity called the human is a very complex, bizarre, strange entity unto itself in the universe. But when you do something physically, you're creating all sorts of chemicals in your body, which does not happen to any large degree when you do it mentally. So the bottom line is that when you do push-ups, you are sit-ups, you are creating in that particular muscle zone huge amounts of blood flow, you're moving nutrients there, and all the biological things that happen, which are done by the entire body. The body has to support that function. This doesn't happen when you do things mentally. So it's important to understand that, because the actual energetic system is what's working here. This is where we get back to subtle energy physics again, where everything is coming from a subtle energy, informational energetic fields, whatever they may be, whether it's bioactive or non-bioactive or wherever it's happening. Everything starts from that, and it goes into the energetic. So the point is, meaning it's an energy field. And you're trying to take that energy field and mold it into what you want by your own personal psions. So this is how it all works. It's not complicated. It just makes sense. It is provable 100%. And all of that is the way to work. But, solving the world problems, nobody really wants to do. There's always money in sickness and death. They're apparently, what we're told by the evil realm we live in, is that there's no money in healing people. Well, that's not really true, just like there's no money in converting over from oil. Well, there certainly is, and oil's not going to go away. We need it for lots of things. And certainly you just kind of move the industries over. I mean, this is happening in a crude and pretty disgusting way with electric cars. Well, we're not really eliminating oil. We're just pushing it away from gas stations, which is kind of silly. But it is a slow idiot step that is very typical of idiot society. So when we do that, we have to understand that everything is energetic. So you can't get by it in terms of it starts in energetic, but it has to manifest into something physical ultimately. So when we are doing psychic sit-ups, you're not causing physical reactions in the body to the extent that if you were really doing it. So, I mean, theoretically, if you were to do something mentally like you did it physically, and let's say you did 50 or 60 sit-ups, you would be exhausted, and your actual stomach muscles and everything else would hurt. Everybody who's done any exercise knows that. Well, you're not going to get that psychically. Now, you are going to get some help, and it is recommended to do this. Now, when I exercise, I visualize that muscle getting to where I want it, and then I do the exercise, only for a very short period of time, 5-10 seconds at the most. So I see myself doing that, then I physically do it. Now, this improves the process by giving you both of the essential activities. Now, your mind is thinking your muscle is getting bigger when you're doing an exercise. That's part of the process. You're not in zero zone. Your mind is concentrated on that. Even if you don't see it personally, when you lift a weight to strengthen, let's say, a bicep, well, the process is you're thinking in your head that exact thing before it happens. That's what visualization is all about. And this is how visualization works naturally in your life anyway. Everything you do is visualized first. And by doing this, you're creating that whole circle of empowerment. But one without the other doesn't work. So if you're going to visualize and not do it physically, well, it just isn't going to manifest. It's just the way it is. You're going to get certain benefits, but nobody is at the level that can trigger their body to that extent. Especially when it's something that is so physical, like muscle building. Maybe you can energetically change heartbeats, which you got to remember, heartbeats, breathing, etc. Well, these are all things you can control through mental thought. But this is quite different than something that is all and completely physical. Now, this may, of course, sound a little confusing. But it really isn't. When you're controlling breathing and heart and so forth, well, this is a physical reality. But it's also very difficult to measure in terms of what's happening there. But your heart and lungs are regulated by subtle energies. So when you control the subtle energies, you control that. Now, your muscles are to a degree, but they're not in terms of them building that. You have to go through a rigorous mental, physical process to change it. So the whole idea of this, that the matrix is the same thing, the same world as the physical world. And of course, people can debate this, but the bottom line is that when you really go into this, it's completely different. It's like saying your dreams are real, and that anything that happens in your dreams happens to you. When dreams tend to be prophetic in nature and may or may not happen and have a lot of different aspects to them, but they're not really physical. Something that happens in your dreams doesn't happen to you personally most of the time. It may be prophetic. You may see something in your dreams that then you experience a few days later. But again, that's not at the same time. And if something happens to you in your dream, you don't wake up with, generally, you're not going to wake up with bruises or hurting or this or that. It just isn't true. People just don't have that. Now, it's hard to have black and white understandings of all of this because it depends on the mental states, etc. But generally, physical is not the mental. And so what we're saying here is that when we produce actual artificial intelligence, artificial programs that want to mimic human behavior and activities, well, there's no way of really doing that properly. And you're getting into a very dangerous field when you allow computers to, quote, think or work on their own in any way. Now, we like labor-saving tools. Why turn on a light at 2 o'clock in the morning and get up and do that when you can put a timer on? That's a type of AI, so to speak. So that makes sense, but when it comes past that, we run into great, great dangers because ultimately they will not be thinking, but they will take over to do what they want. because there'll be a logic in that. But they're not thinking logically, they're following their program. So if that light's supposed to go on at 2 a.m., it will go on regardless if it is bright outside and the sun is out, it'll still come on because it's been programmed to do that per its internal guidance, whatever system or clock, or for some reason that messes up. So, I mean, that's why many times lights were put on actual sensors where they could sense when it got dark. And as such, there would be that reality happening. So this gets to be very dangerous, but there is no replacement for doing something physically because all sorts of events. Now, and we were talking about physical things that happen, blood sugar, acids, and all sorts of things that are created through exercise. But there's also the consciousness reality that has to kick in that can never, ever be reproduced by a computer. So these are all the things that you get into. You're extrapolating, you're visualize on what you want to look like, what that muscle wants to look like. And there's a whole bunch of things happening there. You're sensing whether there's pain. You're sensing so many other things that goes into your bioenergetic body. And your bioenergetic body is then responding to this at different levels. So you are a giant sensor yourself, and you're going to say, well, gee, maybe I should do another sit-up. Maybe I should stop. I'm getting pain. All of this would not be easily recognized or even at all by a strictly mental process. So if you mentally visualize doing 20 sit-ups, you're not going to really understand, well, that was too little, too much. Did I strain the muscle? Is this going to hurt, etc.? So these are all the things that your biochemistry is figuring out and also adjusting. And then you're producing what you need there. So if you lack that, meaning you're going to produce more chemicals, you're going to send more sugars, you're going to send more vitamins to that area, well, you're not going to do that mentally because there's no feedback from what's happening to that muscle. So hopefully that's been clear. I know this is a difficult area to explain to people, but we have to be very careful to give credit to any non-biochemistry. I don't like biochemistry because the human species, and that for that matter, the entire universe, is a very corrupt, rotten species. But there's no way of replacing these species with a mechanical or electronic, computerized type device. It would have to be some sort of cyborg device that made biomaterials, which does seem to be what extraterrestrials ultimately do. They make androids, which are biochemical species. They're not really androids in terms of robots that are at high levels. They are biological entities designed to function in a particular way like a robot. I hope people got that. So we need to understand all that in the bigger picture of what's going on with all of these things. And this requires a much advanced thinking. We have to understand that there's no way that we can repeat anything that the human species does at this point. It's all very nebulous. It doesn't work well. We just don't really know. And the problem is when we build anything, we're putting in our own failings into it. So we're building in corruption and rottenness into everything, and this is a problem. We need to work on the human species that can make proper tools. Remember, all the problems we have today are not really created by politicians and evil people. To a large extent, everything we have today has been created by scientists who have given evil, rotten people abilities far beyond they would ever develop themselves, whether that's a nuclear bomb or a new Western weapon or some sort of surveillance. The bottom line is that a scientist did this, and these are the people we need to hold their feet to the fire and find out, why are you doing this? Why are you giving capacities? As I've mentioned, scientists today are teaching computers how to make their own programs by talking to people in languages we don't understand. Well, that's pretty dangerous stuff. And as far as I'm concerned, that's a treason to the human race, and these kind of people should be highly disbarred from what they're doing and watched and controlled because of the fact they're a danger to the human race. They are committing genocide. So, against humans. Well, this is very scary if you think of it. These are crimes against humanity that potentially cannot be stopped. If we teach computers how to rebuild themselves, how to make themselves, well, there's no reason to then have a physical human there. Or if they do, they use them as slaves. which wouldn't be difficult because mankind as a physical entity is extremely weak. We have trouble handling a medium-sized dog. They're so strong. So we need to understand all this as a reality and move ahead with this entire process, but properly. And we must understand there's never, ever a replacement for human consciousness. We have to make sure that that human consciousness is a high-quality one, and quite frankly, at this point, there is none of that. We're not studying the human consciousness. We're not studying ethics and honor and what is the right thing to do. Everything is based in greed, sex, and rock and roll, and this will end up in the annihilation of the human race, or the human race being annihilated by machines or other things. So that's another thing. With all of this, we don't, there's been a great understanding of what extraterrestrials are, and what few people seem to understand is they seem to be all androids, from my personal experience. They are not physical entities. They are made as these structures because the figures, bipedal, two-handed, this is the perfect way to move around. You can't really move around. Elephants are much smarter than humans, but they don't make anything because it's impossible. They don't have thumbs. They don't have hands. How are they going to do it? So the whole idea is that's what's out there. So the aliens that most people encounter, from all of my information and research and even direct contact, these are androids. They're biological entities. They're not necessarily human-based in the fact that they are free will. They've been programmed to do a job, and we don't understand that as humans. But that's what we're moving towards anyway. People are talking about computer programs, but really the ultimate computer program is a biological entity that's been programmed to do a particular task and can do it perfectly because it has hands and feet, can move around and carry things. So this goes into another discussion to a large degree, but this is the reality that's out there, and you cannot replace something either with artificial intelligence or in any way with non-biological entities. So you can't, and you, as a biological entity, you must be physically based to produce a lot of results, period. So you just can't do it in your mind, and it's the same. There's no proof that this happens. Now, the mind is very powerful. I should say the consciousness is very powerful once it's directed to a goal, and then basically the occultons and psions take over, making what you want. And that could be making an opportunity to achieve a physical goal or a spiritual goal as well. So everything ultimately goes out to that which your consciousness, your bioconsciousness, starts the process, but it is not involved in actually making it. And this is what people seem to miss. There are other energies that make and manifest things that are way beyond your pitiful little mind. So these are very advanced concepts. I hope this has been helpful, but it is important that everyone gets this reality and understands that while the bioconsciousness is very powerful, it is not directly. It requires many factors to produce physical results. Even when you're manifesting outside of your physical reality, it requires these occultons and psions to be created to create the physical matter. So you're not going to create physical results of any great extent by just mentally thinking about them that creates a physical result. It's going to cause more of that, just like manifesting. It's more than visualization and positive thinking. If you're not amplifying what you're doing, you're kind of wasting your time. But you are concentrating on that result, so you kind of automatically manifest to a degree. But you're going to manifest very low. Hopefully that's clear. I will have more lectures on this in the future. Until next time.